Hi there, I'm Ray Harwood. I was the facilitator for this Cochise chapter of the Arizona Native Plant Society meeting, and it was conducted over Zoom. We did the recording, and I've done some editing, and I'm happy to bring it to you here on YouTube. But I did want to explain a couple of things before you get right into the presentation. Sue Carnahan, our presenter, is talking to us over a cell phone connection, and her video is coming over a satellite connection. And in the wonders of electronics and the wonders of Zoom, unfortunately, sometimes the audio and the video don't quite match up. So you'll notice that maybe a little bit while you're looking at the presentation, but the pictures are beautiful. And the things that she has to say about the area are just wonderful. So hopefully you can look past a couple of those little technical flaws. The rest of the presentation is just absolutely wonderful. Here we go. Please enjoy the presentation.
Well, let me introduce our speaker tonight, who is Sue Carnahan, someone whom I've known for a number of years now, ever since I moved to Arizona. And it was a real pleasure to cross paths with Sue, and subsequent to that, we've become good friends, and she is just constantly impresses me with her enthusiasm and knowledge and work that she's done in botany here in Arizona. So Sue resides in Santa Cruz County on the Salero Ranch, which is what she's going to be talking about today. And there she has indicated that she specializes in botanizing on rocky slopes and chigger-filled grasslands. And what's going to be the main topic she's speaking about tonight is her latest publication, which is the Flora of the Salero Ranch, which was just published recently in the journal Kenosha, which is this journal published by the Arizona State University. It's an online journal, and if you're not familiar with it, I would certainly suggest that you check that out because it's a wonderful resource. And you can get just online, you can just Google it and all the back issues and so forth. It's a wonderful resource. But Sue has done an incredible amount of work in botany here in Southern Arizona and also in Sonora. She's co-author with Richard Felger, who, as you know, very sadly just passed away a few months ago, and also Jesus Sanchez Escalante of a forthcoming flora of the Guaymas region of Sonora, Mexico. So since that really wasn't enough to really keep her fully busy, she's also working on the flora of the Santa Rita Mountains with Jim Verrier, and a flora of the Coal Mine Canyon, and a checklist of the plants of Santa Cruz County. So Sue is an amazing person, and we're very grateful to have her tonight. I should point out also, she will, which will become obvious to you, she's a fabulous photographer. And so she's going to share with us tonight the work that she did on the Salero Ranch, and as it has appeared in the journal Kenosha. Okay, Sue, it's over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Pretty over the top, I have to say. You'll notice that all those things I'm involved in pretty much revolve around Santa Cruz County. So a lot of them overlap. A checklist of Santa Cruz County, I've already done about half of it on the Salero Ranch. So it's not as much work as it might sound, but thank you nonetheless. And thanks, Ray Harwood, for doing all the technological stuff tonight. Ray is running my slides because I don't have a good enough evening internet set up here. So, and thank you everyone for joining tonight, making room in your busy Friday evenings to listen to talk about plants. It's fun. It's good to see a number of you here that I know, and then others that I don't, and hope to meet someday. Okay, so I'm going to talk this evening about the flora I did of the Salero Ranch, diversity in a grassland. And the photo, for some of you, you heard this already, the photo on the title screen was taken by my husband, Curtis Smith. It is a photo looking across the Salero Ranch, looking southwest from the Santa Rita foothills. So we are, I think, just off of the ranch boundary. So almost everything you see is part of the ranch, except for the far distant view, which is the San Cayetano Mountains in Rio Rico, the Atascosa Peaks, very distant, and then Sonora, Mexico. As you can see, there's a lot of up and down on the ranch. It's definitely not one of those level grassland ranches. Lots and lots of rocks, hills, cliffs, small mountains, and drainages and canyons. This is a regional map showing where the Salero Ranch is. It's outlined in orange, a little bit to the right of center in Santa Cruz County, which is also a little bit to the right of center in this map. Sue Rutman prepared this map for me, and I thought she did a fantastic job. I tried doing them myself and gave up. So I really thank Sue for the work she put into these. The overlay on this map, which you'll see is the map shows Santa Cruz County, part of Pima County, and part of Cochise County, where many of you guys are located, is Brown and Lowe's biotic communities. And the rather dull brown that is covering most of the Salero Ranch and a lot of the center of the map is semi-desert grassland or scrub grassland. The green nearby is Madrean evergreen woodland or oak woodland. And usually where you see the green, that's one of the Sky Island ranges of the region. And in the highest Sky Islands, you'll see a magenta color, which is montane conifer forest. But you can see that the Salero Ranch is mainly in the grassland region, and there is oak woodland and a little bit of pinyon woodland in the northeast corner, which is in the Santa Rita Mountains. This is a close-up of the ranch area. It's roughly square with a bit of a jagged west edge, again outlined in orange. And then you'll notice that there's a big irregular shape cut out at the bottom south end of the ranch, and that is a property that used to be Salero Ranch and was purchased by Arizona Game and Fish between 2004 and 2007. To protect a native population of the endangered Gila top minnow. So that is actually the Coal Mine Canyon watershed that I have started a Flora of just recently, working with Game and Fish permit. Historically, it was Salero Ranch, and now it's Game and Fish, and it's under management of the state parks, Arizona State Park System. So on the map of the Salero Ranch, there are some skeleton roads drawn in. There are blue circles representing cattle ponds. There are many cattle ponds. This has been a working ranch for decades. There are blue triangles representing perennial springs. I didn't include all the springs, but I included some of the ones that are most significant for plants and other critters. You see at the bottom, the data I have there, the area of the ranch is just over 16,000 acres, about 25 square miles. The elevation range is quite significant. The lowest elevation is 3773 feet, the highest 6344, which is more than 2,500 feet in difference. And it's not all one slope, as you saw from the previous slides. It's really up and down with a big uplift area called the Grosvenor Hills, right in the sort of center middle of the ranch. Precipitation, except for last year, well, the 50-year average of precipitation is about 18 inches a year. So it gets a pretty good amount of rain, about 10 inches of that in the monsoon. Last year was about half that much. So it's looking very, very brown out here right now. Vegetation, as I said before, mostly scrub grassland, some oak woodland, seasonal riparian corridors, and perennial springs and cattle ponds. I'll do a brief history of the ranch. In the write-up I did for the Flora publication in Kenosha, there's a much longer history if you're interested in that history of land use, especially in this part of Southeast Arizona. The earliest recorded uses of the land out here is silver mining. Possibly as early as 1690s, the Spanish were doing prospecting in the Santa Ritas and elsewhere. And the two of the mines on the Salero Ranch, the Salero mine and the Alto mine, possibly date from 1690s. Mining continued sporadically up until the early 1900s. In the meantime, in the 1800s or possibly earlier, cattle were grazing this region. 1853, the Gadsden Purchase brought this land into the United States, where it was formerly Mexico or under Spanish control. It was called New Mexico Territory when it was brought into the United States. 1860, the Baca Float Grant number 3 was established in the area that includes the Salero Ranch. The Baca Floats were part of the Spanish land grant history. A New Mexico sheep rancher lost out on some grants he supposedly had. And when the United States took possession of this region, he petitioned Congress for redress, and they granted him 5 floats of 100,000 acres each. And one of them was right here where the Salero Ranch is located. 1938, about a quarter of that ranch was sold as one unit, and that became the Salero Ranch. 1972, it was purchased by the Hudson family, who are the current owners of the ranch and the cattle operation, the ranch headquarters. And from 1998 to the present day, it has been a working ranch with a cow-calf operation and a rural subdivision. And I've lived out here since 2000, so 20 years. And you see that photo there, that's a photo from the USGS service in 1909 of the Salero mine. Just a few photos of the Salero camp, which was the community that supported the Salero mine. It's a kind of crumbling ghost town at this point. It's on private land. It's on land belonging to the Hudson family, the owners of the headquarters of the ranch. Kind of cool to see where it is, and while the buildings are still standing, to imagine what it was like to work a mine and to live out here in the 1800s, at least 1900s. A sketch, engraving, I think, actually, from a sketch done in the 1860s of what's called the Santa Rita Valley. And this really is the Salero Ranch, the main valley of the Salero Ranch, looking at the Grosvenor Hills. This is from a sketch by Horace Grosvenor, and the hills are named for him. And the reason he's out here doing this sketch is he's one of the principals of the Santa Rita Mining Company, established on what would become the Salero Ranch. 2 of the other principals in the mining company are William Wrightson and Gilbert Hopkins. And if you know the Santa Ritas, you know Mount Wrightson and Mount Hopkins. And all 3 of these men, Wrightson, Hopkins, and Grosvenor, were killed by Apaches. And so, as is our somewhat strange custom, we name mountains after these white people that get killed by Indians. So here is a look out across the kind of the north part of the Salero Ranch, looking south towards the Grosvenor Hills. And that Hyatt area is an area that we locally refer to as the Grosvenor Cliffs. The Grosvenor Hills geologically are a set of laccoliths, which are stone lakes. That's what laccolith means. And they are formed when magma came up through layers of overlying rock and then hit a resistant layer, which would have been probably a layer of rhyolite, rhyodacite, something like that, hit that layer and spread out. And what happens in a laccolith, it spreads out as kind of a lake and then it cools. And these laccoliths on the Salero Ranch are in the shape of sort of like old-fashioned doorknobs on their sides, or maybe a hamburger bun, if you will. So they're sort of rounded on their sides, and they spall off when they're weathering as rocks, and you get these very vertical cliffs. I'll show you a close-up in a minute. Just to show you, it's not all green and warm out here. This was about a 5-inch snowfall in January of 2007, I think. Probably the biggest snowfall we've experienced. Most winters, there's at least one snowfall, that sticks around for a couple of hours. You get a lot of photos, and then the sun comes up and it melts. It's perfect kind of snow, in my personal opinion. This is, we've gone across that valley to the Grosvenor Hills, and we're turned around and looking north across that same valley, looking at the Santa Rita Mountains. Mount Hopkins is on the left. If you could see it, you'd see the observatory on the top. Mount Wrightson is sort of just left of center. And then those brown foothills are the Santa Rita foothills, and the Salero Valley stretched out in front of you. The green is mesquite trees. This is a photo taken in April. This is an image I created using Google Earth. I wanted to show basically the topography of the Salero Ranch. And I took a Google Earth view, an oblique view, and looking north again, you see the Santa Ritas towards the top. That yellow trapezoid that I crudely drew in there basically contains the Salero Ranch. The one thing I didn't have the skills to do was cut out that game and fish piece in the middle of the bottom, but you can imagine it. Anyway, the lumpiness, all that brown lumpiness is basically the Grosvenor Hills. You can see where the ranch gets up into a little bit of the Santa Rita foothills in the upper right corner. And you can see it's really not a big, long, level, sprawling ranch. It's just lots of hills and rocks and great microhabitats for plants, great places to go hiking and hunting for plants and animals. In the very top left corner of the slide, you can see the tailing ponds of the mines that are west of Sarita and Green Valley. This is a close-up of the part of the Grosvenor Cliffs. This is one of the edges of one of those laccoliths, those stone lakes made of rhyodacite. There's some real cliffs with a few waterfalls when there's after a good monsoon storm. On the north-facing slopes here, there's dense clusters of oaks. Really steep climbs getting up to the base of those cliffs. It's basically a talus slope covered in grass. This is a view of the west edge of one of those laccoliths, the Grosvenor Hills, going right along Josephine Canyon, which is a massive canyon that drains the Santa Rita Mountains on the south side. And part of Josephine Canyon cuts right through the west edge of the Salero Ranch. Just a view of some oak woodland up in the Santa Rita foothills part of Salero Ranch. And this is just to show you one of the biggest cattle pond on the ranch. This is a drone shot. Curtis was learning how to use a drone, and he had a really nice morning and sent it up over we call it the big tank. It covers maybe 6 to 8 acres when it's full. It's all from runoff. It's not filled by a well. There's no natural spring in there. And believe it or not, this photo was taken in June of 2020. After we had quite a bit of, maybe early June, there was a big rainstorm, 1.5 inches, something like that. And you can see the greenery that's just mainly mesquite trees. The trees that are in the middle of the pond are Gooding willow. So let's get into the flora. Flora numbers. 781 species I have documented on the Salero, 789 taxa, that includes some varieties, some subspecies. 720 of all those are native, 69 exotic. I did include a few things that have been planted historically and were just sort of persisting, like a European olive, some pomegranate shrubs at the mining sites, and a pyracantha. Many of those are not reproducing, but they're just hanging out there with no tending and no watering. 446 genera, 103 families. Just to give a shout out to the largest families, if you're familiar with the flora of this region, you won't be surprised that the asters and grasses are the 2 biggest families for the flora. Sometimes grasses are first, sometimes asters are first. In this case, the aster family has 130 members on the Salero, grasses 115. 34 of those are non-native, and that's also fairly typical of floras in this region. You'll have a lot of non-native grasses. Some of them are invasive and troubled. Some of them are little non-natives that pop up here and there and don't seem to do anything bad to the local flora. Also, very typical for floras in the region is that legumes are the 3rd largest with 72 taxa. And then it's sort of a fight when you get in the 4th, 5th, 6th place. In this case, spurges, and then mallows, the mustard family, which also usually has a few non-natives involved, sedges, and these are mostly dryland sedges, things that grow using the summer rains as their impetus, and that they don't necessarily need permanent standing water. Maidenhair fern family, they love this rocky terrain, cactus, and nightshades. Just a look at some of the largest genera. Muhlenbergia is the winner with 18 muley grasses on the ranch. These are all native, and they range from big bunch grasses to wispy little annuals you could pick out with your little finger. Followed by Euphorbia. That genus is usually up among the top species getters in the race to be in the largest genera. 17 little euphorbias on Salero, and some of those are the flat sand mats you may see around your driveway, kind of weedy areas, and others are perennial or annual erect herbs. Cyperus or cypress is next, and then Bouteloua, the grama grasses, Dahlia, the prairie clovers, bricklebush, love grasses, and ipomaeas. Just do a little shout out for the trees. A few examples here. In the upper left is alligator bark juniper. There's also Arizona juniper. Oaks, the top middle is Mexican blue oak, very common throughout the ranch. There's also Arizona oak, emery oak, silverleaf oak, a little bit up in the foothills, and Toomey oak, also up in the Santa Rita foothills. Down in the lower left, a magnificent Arizona walnut. And I hiked by this tree just the other day, and I think this photo I must have taken at its height, because the tree looks like it's about half dead. There are other walnuts coming along to take its place, hopefully, if we get rain, if we ever get rain again. But this was really a magnificent tree. And in the middle, ash trees. This is the smaller leafed ash, Fraxinus goodingi. And there's also widespread velvet ash, Fraxinus velutina. 4 species of willows. Over on the right, this is yew leaf willow. There's also bonplan, coyote willow, and gooding willow. So just to show you the sort of the higher elevation tree would be the border pinyon. Those start to come in around 5,000 feet in the Santa Rita foothills, and they then become relatively common as you head more and more towards the Santa Ritas themselves. And on the other end of the spectrum is the saguaro. There are, as far as I know, 2 saguaros on the Salero Ranch. I thought it was only 1 until some hiking neighbors said, no, there's another one. It's about 6 feet tall. And sure enough, they were right. The one on the right, I didn't know about until last year. The one on the left is just growing a bud. Just up on the right side near the top, you can see a little lump, and that lump is becoming an arm. So that's pretty exciting. I'm just going to go through some families, some plants that I like or that are interesting or rare. This one, I've just always been enamored of the Pacific mosquito fern, Azala folliculoides. It appears on slow-moving water, usually a drainage below a leaking cattle pond on the Salero. Usually appears in December. I'm not really sure the mechanism there. When I look up records that other people have found this mosquito fern, it's March or other times of year. But just for a sense of scale, you can see the bunch grasses in the right-hand photo. Those are deer grass. So this mosquito fern spreads out, covers the pond. It's not really a pond, just a channel of water. We'll go through a few grasses, the grama grasses. There are 5 of the 11. Top is spruce top grama, a lovely sort of fuzzy common grass in rocky ground. On the right is side oats grama, widespread, very common, lovely grass. Can make a lovely bunch grass. Lower left is elusive grama, which eluded me for about 3 years of doing this flora until I finally realized that's what grows along my driveway. I had misidentified it, or I just ignored it, perhaps, I'm not sure. And it's not exactly common out here, but I've found it probably in 10 or 12 places. It likes scrappy, gravelly, rocky soil. And my driveway is scrappy, gravelly, rocky soil, so there it grows. The middle lower is hairy grama, which can look a bit like blue grama, very common grass, especially in Cochise County, where a lot of you guys are. But hairy grama has a little spike coming off that flowering branch to the left, and that spike tells you it's hairy grama. And on the lower right is purple grama. I think it's named for its dark, kind of reddish purple anthers. Muhlenbergias, 18 kinds of Muhlenbergias. I'm showing 3 of the ones on here are bunch grasses. The top middle one is bullgrass. The lower left is long-tongue muley, which has 2 distinct habitat preferences, it appears. It grows along these sort of level, rocky drainages on the ranch, not in the drainage like deer grass, the one in the lower middle, but just on the edge of the drainage. And then it also grows on steep north-facing slopes up in the foothills, up above 5,000 feet. And then the lower right is purple muley. That's probably my favorite. One of my favorite. I have a lot of favorites. One of my favorites, gorgeous, dark reddish purple flowering stems. It is a bunch grass, not common at all. I have not figured out its habitat preference yet. And then the upper right is a delicate muley, and that's just one of those annuals that there's several that look very similar. You really need a hand lens, a microscope, a key, and then a little bit of practice figuring them out. one more muley to talk about, and that is bamboo muley. I can't get away without talking about bamboo muley. I found it in numerous places on Salero Ranch, usually a north-facing cliff slope or rocky slope, bouldery slope, usually out of reach of cows. It looks lush and green like a big stand of bamboo in the summer, and it flowers in the spring when it looks sort of scrappy, brownish. Invasive grasses. I will just talk briefly about these. The upper left is yellow blue stem, Brothriochloa ischiumum or ischemum. I think that's a big problem in Cochise County. It's also becoming quite common in the Santa Ritas, and I've seen it in numerous places on the Salero Ranch, including my yard, where it got yanked immediately. But I don't know. I'm not a person who is going to be spending my life chasing after invasive grasses, so it is just going to be where it's going to be in my neighborhood. In the middle, lemon lovegrass. This grass has been around forever. It's part of some of the experimental grasses used in Southeast Arizona in the 1930s. In the 1980s, it was aerially seeded across the Salero on the advice that the owner got from other ranchers and range managers in the region. Fortunately, he seeded it along with side oats grama. The side oats grama has done really well, and so has the lemon. So what are you going to do? That horse on the right is actually eating lemon lovegrass. Cattle do eat it, not preferentially, but they do eat it, especially in the winter. Lower left is Wilman lovegrass. It's really a lovely non-native lovegrass, but again, it too, I believe, is becoming more and more of a problem, invading areas where native grasses would otherwise grow. The biggest problem currently, I would say, on the ranch is Natal grass, Malinus repens, the beautiful silky red florets in the center, lower center slide, and also that sort of pasture of it on the lower right. It has taken over south-facing hill slopes up towards the Santa Rita foothills, and they just turn pink in the late summer, early fall. I don't have bufflegrass on here. Bufflegrass occurs in 7, 8, 9 localities on the ranch. Doesn't seem to be spreading much. I think I'm hoping that's because it's always surrounded by other grasses. It doesn't have empty spaces to fill, but I don't know, maybe it's just biding its time. There is plenty of Eragrostis curvula, weeping lovegrass, boar's lovegrass, plenty of that around, especially in the foothills. Bermuda grass, I don't know, I could go on, but let's move on. Okay, I never tire of seeing this plant, this blue mud plantain, Heteranthera. First time I found it was early on in doing the flora. In fact, it was the first day I had volunteers come out to help with the flora. And I think the two people who helped that day, Glenn Branham and Susie Husband, are in the audience tonight. And thanks, you guys, because we walked up to this pond and looked at it. And I said, I thought for sure it was non-native, but I said, well, we got to collect it. I thought it was some sort of escaped, the water feature kind of plant. And Glenn, as such a gentleman, offered to lay his jacket down in the mud so I could reach out and get a specimen. But we worked around that. He didn't need to ruin his jacket for the specimen. This plant is native. I'm not really sure if Limosa is the right name. There's also rotundifolia, and there seems to be some difficulty in separating the two species. But either way, both of them, whichever one it is considered native and part of the Arizona flora. It grows on ponds. It grows in slow-moving water. It's a lovely, lovely little plant. This is probably my favorite family of plants in this region, the dogbane family, which includes the milkweed family, Asclepiadaceae, has been wrapped up in Aposinaceae. So this family with milkweeds and other milk vines and such is one of my favorites. There are 7 milkweed species on the ranch. Pine needle milkweed, that one on the left, is very common. It loves rocks. And if I didn't mention it, Salero Ranch is a very rocky place. Pine needle milkweed grows all over the place. Rocky cliffs, boulder outcrops, rock crevices, gravelly slopes, whatever. It's a very happy plant out here. Slim pod milkweed, Asclepias quinquedentata. I just found one wispy, tiny little plant in the foothills of the Santa Ritas on the ranch and was very excited, collected a few flowers, took about 300 photographs. And that was my specimen for the flora, but I guess that's legitimate as anything. Gonolobus arizonicus, Arizona milk vine, an incredibly wonderful plant. It seems relatively common on Salero. I was surprised. I keep running across it in these south-facing rocky canyons and washes. I didn't see any records on SINET, at least, the Southwest Biodiversity site in Cochise County. And that seems crazy to me. So if any of you know of its occurrence in Cochise, you need to get a specimen and get it on SciNet or get it on record somewhere. It's not rare. It's pretty widespread wherever it occurs. Santa Cruz is probably where most of the specimens are going to be located, and in Mexico. I didn't mention before, almost every single one of these plants I'm showing occurs in Sonora as well. I just didn't put it on any of the slides. This was a really fun, if you saw my talk for the symposium, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but this polystemma species is going to get a new name. When I found it on the Salero on a bouldery south-facing slope, it was new to the United States. It's well known in Sonora, but it's mostly been known as Matelia tristiflora. And Mark Fishbein, the milkweed guy, milkweed expert for especially this region of the country, has always considered these plants that are throughout most of, say, central Sonora and up to be a separate species from the real Matelia tristiflora down in Alamos and southward. And so since it's been now found in the United States, he wants to describe it as something new. And it and Matelia tristiflora will be both put into the genus Polystemma. So stay tuned. As part of the wrap-up of this flora, I decided I needed to do a lot more hiking on slopes and kind of gnarly-looking canyons that I had been avoiding. And on one of those hikes, I came across an ageratina that I didn't recognize. Didn't look like the other two, or is it three in the flora? Other two in the flora, or other ones I'd seen in the region. And sure enough, it turned out to be Ageratina thursiflora, a second U.S. record. It had been recorded from Nogales in 1929. So probably there are more plants of this around. We just have to keep looking. Maybe in the Patagonias would be a good place to look, or the Atascosas. Jack, if you're listening. Currently only known in the U.S. from Santa Cruz County, and then it's known in Mexico. Lagacia decipiens, doll's head. I just love this plant. It's very common in Sonora, but in the U.S., it really mainly occurs in Santa Cruz County with a few areas just into Pima County at the north and west corners of Santa Cruz. The big sort of shrubby perennial flowers mostly in the summer, can flower in the spring with good rains. I've found flowers in January on the hill behind my house, where it's actually on state trust land, not on the Salero. Just a really, really lovely plant. It's a good host for a few uncommon moths, probably other critters. I think I photographed a beetle on it that someone said didn't appear to be ideable. So keep your eye out for this in Cochise County if you're low elevation, south facing slope, something facing Mexico. So floras are never done, as anyone who's ever done them. And the week that this flora was published in April last year, I was walking not far from my house on the neighbor's property and found this stylocline micropoides, new for Salero Ranch. I was about 2 feet from my house. So I don't know, apparently I haven't been paying attention for 6 years. Anyway, I'm sure more of that will happen unless I never leave the house, which is not likely to be true. Cactus, just one cactus to talk about here, Mammillaria wrightii, variety Wilcoxii, reasonably common out on the Salero Ranch and up in the Santa Rita foothills. You really need to see flowers to identify this cactus. There's a very similar one that I've never personally seen, Mammillaria viridiflora. They also both look somewhat like Mammillaria grammii, the really widespread Graham's nipple cactus. The flowers are what tell this one apart from the other two. Grows in oak woodland and north-facing grassy slopes, often just buried in the grasses. You've got to almost stumble on it to find it. Lobelia fenestralis, fringe leaf lobelia. This is an annual. If I look at the SciNet map of this plant, there's just a few records for Southeast Arizona. I mean, maybe 10, 15. I can't understand why it's not more widespread. One population of it on Salero in a kind of a summer wet swale, and that's apparently the kind of habitat it likes, where it's going to be sort of marshy during the summer rainy season. But there's got to be more habitat like that around, and so just keep your eye out for it. It's showy, be hard to miss, and it's really pretty. Amarexia palmatifida, Saya. There are 2 species in this genus in Arizona, and the other one, Gonzalezii, is a rare plant. I think typically found in limestone, does not occur on the Salero Ranch. So this one, Palmatifida, is widespread. It loves rocky slopes, and if I didn't mention it before, Salero is very rocky. So I think the entire plant is edible, but check with somebody who knows more before you eat everything. I know you can eat the fruits and the seeds. Richard Felger told me that. This was probably one of the last species I added to the flora, this Ipomaea muricata. It's, as far as I could tell, new for Arizona. Lilac bell is the common name. It's one of 8 Ipomaeas on the Salero Ranch. I found this in Josephine Canyon in a broad wash, and it's, I think it's an annual, although when I've seen it in San Carlos, which is where that flowering photo is from, I have never seen it like that up here. It's just a big swarming morning glory climbing over shrubs. And I've seen it elsewhere in Sonora looking like a fairly weedy, tangly Ipomaea. Very pretty. It is already known from the US because apparently it's a contaminant in soybean seeds and soybean fields. So it's just new to Arizona as far as I know. Thurber's morning glory is really common on Salero Ranch. It appears to really like rocky, gentle slopes. And we have a lot of rocky, gentle slopes. And so there's a lot of Thurber's morning glory. It's lovely. Flowers open at about 6 p.m. in the summer. It's a perennial, grows from a tuber. I haven't dug them up, but some javelina dug up a big patch of them on our hill behind our house. So I got to look at the tuber. I think most of the photos I've seen of this plant show pink flowers, but all of the ones on Salero, almost all the ones on Salero have been pure white. Graptopetalum, Bartramii, a really cool stone crop. Probably many of you have seen this plant. There are numerous sites for it in the Santa Rita Mountains, in the Patagonia Mountains, in Sycamore Canyon in the Pajaritos, as well as a few sites in Pima County and in Cochise. I don't know about the Huachucas. I think there are collections from the Chiricahuas. It has a sister species, Graptopetalum rosebii. Rosebii flowers in the spring, Bartramii flowers in the fall. That's one big difference. There are differences in the flowers and there are differences in the leaves, although I'm not enough of an expert to tell them apart just from the rosette of leaves. But it's a very cool plant. On the Salero, it only grows up in the northeast corner in the Santa Rita foothills. Mexican croton. This croton occurs in the U.S. only in Santa Cruz County. It's known from the Sycamore Canyon, Warsaw Canyon area in the Pajarito Mountains. This is west of Interstate 19. And it's known from Fresno Canyon on Salero Ranch. So those are the 2 basic localities. Probably it will be found somewhere else. I hope so. It's always fun to keep expanding these rare plants range. It's relatively widespread and common in Sonora. I just can't get enough of those long yellow glands on the leaf margins, under the inflorescence, the leaf stem. They're just really cool. A little rundown of the euphorbia species. Here are 5 of them out of 17. If you like leaves and little seeds and weird little flowers that don't really have petals, even though they look like they do, this is a great genus to get interested in. You just need to work at it, start collecting them, get a microscope or a hand lens, and start picking your way through them. They're very cool. Legumes. Here is another plant that you in Cochise County need to find. As far as I know, now maybe there are some records that aren't on SciNet. As far as I know, it has not been found in Cochise County. It's common at the south end of the Patagonia Mountains. It grows in the south edge of the Santa Rita Mountains and on Salero Ranch, right up against the Santa Ritas. Common in certain areas in Sonora. It likes decomposed granite and granite slopes. So keep an eye out for it. Pretty big flower, pretty showy when it's flowering. Prairie clovers, 11 dahlia species on Salero, ranging anywhere from shrubs, like that Dahlia formosa in the middle top, that's feather plume dahlia, that's called, to a little ephemeral Dahlia mollissima at the top right. And that is, I only found that, I think, in the last spring of doing the floor. I didn't even know it occurred. It's right on my road. It's right along where I walk just about every other day. But it just tells you have to keep your eyes open. Dahlia nana down on the lower left, dwarf prairie clover, grows on my driveway. It's easy and fun to keep an eye on. Dahlia poganathera, or bearded dahlia, loves gravelly slopes, rocky slopes, calcium-rich soils, of which there are a lot out here. Dahlia wrightii on the lower right, I've only found in 2 places. I believe it likes limestone, and Salero does not have any mapped limestone, but it does have a lot of calcium-rich soils and gravels. So maybe that's what it can put up with. Mario Sousa millifolia. This is one of the formerly known as acacias, a shrub, milfoil wattle, pods. Very unusual for Arizona plants. If you were in Sonora, you would think you had lysoloma, or maybe if you were in the Rincon Mountains where they do have lysoloma, you would think you had lysoloma. But this shrub is just slightly different from lysoloma and relatively common throughout Santa Cruz County, parts of Cochise, and Pima County, I think up to about the Rincon Mountains. That photo on the left shows a whole slope covered in Mario Sousa on Salero Ranch. Mallow family. Mallow family is well represented on Salero. I think there are 27 species. This one, Sida glabra, was new to Arizona and the Western US when I came across it in Fresno Canyon on Salero. Since that time, I've found it in numerous canyons at the south end of the ranch, as well as in Coal Mine Canyon on the adjacent game and fish property. So it's definitely here to stay. It's doing very well. Limacella, mudwort, a cool little annual plant. And it grows, at least on the Salero, in a little seep spring, a little overflowing cattle trough feeds another population. And then I found some near a cement dammed cattle pond. Just pops up and spreads out in a little patch. It actually has stolons connecting one plant to the next. And I just hope that the springs keep going and the cattle ponds keep retaining water so this plant can get through this drought we're in. Solanum houstonii. This is a plant that until recently was considered from Mexico, since been found in 2 places in the US. One is Salero Ranch, where I collected it a year and a half ago now. On one of those bouldery hikes, a hike in which I kept tripping over shrubs, broke a hiking pole in half, lost my press, etc. It was really a rugged hike, but I was rewarded by finding a patch of these Solanum houstonii, new to the US. And sometime after finding these plants, I was talking with Sky Jacobs in Tucson, who had been camping in the Babo Kivris, and he was showing me his photos from his camping trip, and he had photographed Solanum houstonii over there. And I said, Sky, is that really in the Babo Kivris? He said, yeah. I said, that's the second locality for the US. So he said, oh, cool. So the Babo Kivris are pretty far from the Salero Ranch. And so my guess is if it's there and it's on Salero, it's somewhere else in between. So Jack Dash, you've got to get out there and be looking for it in the Atascosas and Pajaritos, and everybody else should be keeping an eye out for it. So that is the last slide. Thank you so much for coming to the talk and listening along. I've got the website there for Kenosha. If you haven't checked out that journal, it's open access, free to anyone. You can download it, share it, read it online. It's got a lot of good issues. Also contains all of the treatments for vascular plants of Arizona. So you'll find, the Arizona treatment for the poppy family, Papaveraceae. Well, you name it. There's dozens of families already written up for Arizona, and you could download all the treatments there. There's my email address. Email me anytime in these days of COVID. It's nice to connect with people that I know and people that I don't know. So drop me a line. Happy to communicate. All right. Any questions?
I do have one question in the chat for you, Sue. Do you have much prickly pear in the grasslands or on the slope?
Yes, lots of prickly pear. I always feel like I never include the right plants when I do one of these talks. Santa Rita prickly pear grows on many, many, many of the slopes, including the one right behind my house. And Engelmann's prickly pear, the more level areas, these are both grassland areas, but the Santa Rita pricklies are on the slopes typically. Up in the oak woodland, up towards the Pinions, I get into, what is it, Opuntia chlorotica? What's the common name for that? Pancake prickly pear, something like that. And a few others, such as Opuntia laevis, the sort of spineless prickly pear, and Opuntia phaeacantha, one representative of that.
And I do have one more in the chat window. Does, and I'm not good at these pronunciations here, Eleonora's barbaculmus grow in Salero?
Yes, it does. It's a fantastic grass. It's not as common here as you might find it in Cochise County because I think usually it starts at a higher elevation. Most of Salero is right around 4,200 to 4,300 feet. And then when you start going up on the slopes, you get into those grasses like Eleonora's barbaculmus. You did very well, Ray, actually. That was good pronunciation. Yes, up in the Santa Rita foothills and on the north slopes in the Grosvenor Hills. Yeah. Wonderful grass.
Can you describe sort of the process you followed to try and collect across that pretty large landscape over a period of, I mean, how did you sort of organize your collecting and accumulating species in that pretty big area?
I think this must be a trick question.
It's not a trick question. I just am interested.
I don't know if I've probably told you, I am not systematic. I'm very organized. I'm good at keeping records, and that's really important when you do it. But I am not systematic at all. And in fact, the first 3 years of doing this flora, I just went out wherever I felt like it. Wherever I happened to park the truck and it looked nice, I'd wandered that direction. And when you're starting a flora, that doesn't really matter because you're collecting 50, you never get out of sight of your truck. You've collected 50 things because you need everything, you know, every kind of grass, every kind of annual, every kind of tree, whatever. And at one point I thought, well, I'm pretty well along on this flora. And I gave a talk at the herbarium lunch talk in Tucson, and Dave Rodelson asked me, so what percentage of your flora area have you covered so far? And I drew a complete blank. I had no idea because I'd never even looked at it in that way. It never even occurred to me I needed to pay attention to covering the whole flora area. Of course I did. So at that point, I started making some maps of where I had collected. And I said, okay, I've never been there, or I've only been there in the spring, not in the summer. I've never been on that side of that hill. And, you know, north side and south side makes a huge difference. Holy cow. The grasses are all different. The trees are different, you know. So there's still places I haven't been. And there's still places I haven't been at certain times of year. But you can't do a flora, well, you can do a flora for 60 years. Richard Felger worked on the Guaymas flora over a period of 60 years. Graduate students do floras in 2 summers or something like that. So I'm somewhere in the middle there. I did about 6 years. And then I said, I think I've milked this for as much as I can get. And there will be more discoveries, and that will be fun or frustrating or something. But I think once I did a lot of collecting kind of randomly, then I started to look around and ask myself questions of where have I been? And SciNet, if you put all your collections in SciNet, you're mapping your own collections. You can generate a map afterwards. It shows all your little points, and you can see where your gaps are, and then you target those places.
Hey, Sue, this is Jared from Tucson. I have a question about Corsetia glandulosa. Do you have that occurring anywhere in your region?
No, I would expect that in a more desert elevation. Corsetia caribea grows out here. It's a little lovely little herbaceous perennial, but not glandulosa, no.
Okay.
This is Rich Bailowitz. How are you, Sue?
Hi, Rich. Good.
I'd like to know about that large tank that you talked about that has 6 to 8 acres or whatever you said.
Yeah.
Is it someplace that, first of all, is it perennial?
It has dried up. It has dried up a few different years. Most years, it's got some water in it all year round. This year, I expect it will dry out, and I've seen it dry a couple of other years.
So are these places like, is that particular tank someplace that's accessible, and do I need permission to go there?
Well, the entirety of Salero Ranch is private. So you need permission just to enter the ranch. I can probably, I mean, you know, you and I can talk. I have permission to go there because I have permission from the ranch owner, and that's part of the ranch, the Hudson family acreage. So it's not open to the public. You have to contact me and make arrangements, and we can talk.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Right here. I do have one more question in the chat. From Karen LeMay, basically, did you guess you would find over 750 species of plants when you started the Flora?
That's a really good question, Karen. When I started the Flora, I knew very little. I knew a handful of plants. I was really learning botany along the way while I was doing a Flora, which is maybe not the best way to do it, but if it's out your backyard, it's possible to do. I spent a lot of time reading floras, reading keys, reading my guide to terminology so I could understand the keys. When I started out, I did a little SciNet map to see how many species were in the area. I made sort of a big circle around the area and said, what am I likely to find? And I came up with something like 1,000. But I had no idea that a lot of those were synonyms, and I really didn't know. I thought if I got to 500, I'd be doing really well. So at 500, I started to think like, oh, I found everything. And then I changed my strategy as in answer to Lynn's question, I said, I need to go more places, more seasons. And I started adding, another 20, another 20, another 20. The other thing that happened was I did a Flora for about 4 years. I was collecting plants for about 4 years before I ever had a good spring bloom. And in that 4th or 5th year, finally, we had just the right combination of winter rains and had a great spring bloom. And all of a sudden I was finding stuff I didn't even recognize. So that made a huge difference. But no, I didn't really have I didn't even have enough knowledge to know what to expect other than that circle on SciNet that suggested 1,000 species in the vicinity. But that was, I think full of error and synonym and all sorts of stuff. So
my goodness, thank you,
Ray.
Sue, for such a wonderful presentation. That was inspiring and educational and entertaining and everything I can think of. We certainly appreciate your participation and stand in awe of your knowledge and your dedication to that very worthwhile project.